Good morning. My name is Francis Bradley, and I'm the CEO of Electricity Canada. We're an organization that acts as the voice of the electricity sector. Our members generate, transmit, and distribute electrical energy to industrial, commercial, residential, and institutional customers across Canada. Members of Electricity Canada include electric utilities, independent power producers, transmission and distribution companies, power marketers, manufacturers and suppliers of materials, technology, and services. I'm here to talk about two of the biggest concerns that the electricity sector has right now. Both of them have to do with building things. The first concern can simply be summarized this way. We need to build it. Build it. Those two words say everything about what Canada's electricity providers want to do. We want to get building because that's what we need to do if we're going to electrify Canada's economy in order to reduce carbon emissions and to help fight the impact of climate change. We believe that funding for electrification initiatives is good news for Canadians. Electrification, using electricity as the primary power source, will in the long term provide the country with efficient, affordable, and reliable energy. But there's a lot we need to get done in order to achieve that. Electrification will require Canada to produce 2 to 3 times the amount of electricity we currently generate. Furthermore, the government wants the electricity sector to be non-emitting by the end of 2035. As of today, May 16th, 2023, there are 4,613 days until the end of 2035. Now, that seems like a large number, but I assure you it is not. Because you can't just flick a switch and suddenly have a greener grid. While Canada has the advantage of already having one of the cleanest electricity systems in the world, there is still much to be planned and much to be built, and we need to do it now. Fortunately, we're already building. This month, we'll be honoring some of the Electricity Canada member innovative projects in our centres of excellence. Now, these include projects such as Heartland Generation in Alberta, which has launched a test program to adapt their Battle River Generating Station, a former coal plant, to operate on 100% hydrogen. Or Atura Power in Ontario, which is working to design and build and operate a 250 megawatt battery energy storage system at its Napanee Generating Station in Bath, Ontario. We've got many more projects in our Centre of Excellence that demonstrate similar commitments to innovation and a willingness to build. That's great work that's happening, but we need to build more. This March's federal budget has given us the tools to begin to do just that. This budget is transformative. It will not only make a low-carbon future possible, it will also make clean electricity more affordable. The new and expanded investment tax credits and moving projects faster and providing greater certainty are important developments. But where this year's budget truly succeeds is in understanding that supporting investments in the electricity sector and a clean economy reflects the public good. These important investments will make sure that the burden of paying for the modernizing of the electricity system will not be shouldered by electricity customers alone. More importantly, infrastructure work that will ultimately help the future of the Canadian economy won't all be passed on to the monthly bills of customers, which will keep electricity affordable. That's not to say we don't have challenges ahead. This brings me to the next part of building that I want to talk about. We need to build things faster. There are challenges with building the electricity projects that we need to make our grid affordable, reliable, and clean. Our regulatory system needs attention. And I'll speak a little bit about that in a moment, but our electricity sector is also often hampered by Canada's cumbersome infrastructure permitting processes. Last fall, a wind-to-hydrogen project was announced in Newfoundland and Labrador. This will only take 2 years to build, yet it's going to take 8 to 10 years to permit. A hydroelectric plant can take 25 years to plan, get approved, and construct. Transmission lines are hugely complicated to survey and then build. Even making sure the electricity infrastructure on your street is ready for the increased load will take years of investments. And yet, the World Bank recently ranked Canada 64th in the world for ease and speed of obtaining construction permits. So Electricity Canada recently developed 2 reports that look at the challenges to building the infrastructure needed to bring the electricity grid to net zero by 2035 and the Canadian economy to net zero by 2050. They investigated the problems from 2 different but interconnected perspectives: the perspective of the regulators and the perspective of those that are doing the building. The first of these reports, Build Things Faster, identifies the barriers to building infrastructure quickly in Canada, which range from the limited capacity of permitting and regulatory bodies to assess and approve applications to problems with planning large-scale interprovincial projects. In it, we offered some solutions that we feel are simple, practical, and achievable. These include coordinating federal project permitting and approvals through a single central federal office, building capacity for regulators to deliver on net zero goals in their decisions promptly and effectively, and implementing the one project, one approval framework described in Budget 2023. The second of our reports talks about regulation. Regulation is the backbone of any large-scale public investment. The principles of rate regulation are the foundation of public utility pricing theories and policies, and they form the basis of the rates customers pay utilities. They were also written by an American economist named James C. Bonbright in 1961. Now think about that. In 1961, we weren't even looking at hardening the electricity grid to make it more reliant to extreme weather, nor were we talking about climate change as a driver for the public good. These ideas didn't exist then, but they do now, which is why our second paper, Back to Bonbright, we are encouraging regulators to go back to those first principles of regulation and adapt them to the 21st century. And finally, I want to say something about the need for a Canadian electricity strategy to help make building it and building it faster a reality. Such a strategy could coordinate new and existing programs, help provide regulatory clarity, and offer a clear path for getting projects built faster. We need this game changer, and the work the government is committed to doing will advance that. Canada's electricity grid was the marvel of the 20th century. It helped to birth the 21st century that we now live in. We want the grid to create the 22nd century, carbon-free, reliable, and affordable. The challenges for doing this are considerable, but with the recent federal budget, they're not insurmountable. It's time to come together, to roll up our sleeves, and to get to work. So let's build it, and let's build it faster. Thank you.
Saskatchewan Premier Scott Moe is coming out today with his own energy plan. He's expected to say that net zero by 2035 isn't possible, that for his province it has to be 2050. Just wondering what you make of that.
It's no secret that there are different challenges depending upon what province you're in. Canada currently has an electricity system that's 84% non-emitting, but that's across the country. There are jurisdictions, Saskatchewan is an example of one, that has a more challenging path to the future. Our view is that the future out to 2035 and out to 2050 is going to be one that will require an all-of-the-above approach to non-emitting electricity. So it's a future where there will be more hydro, although that isn't an option in some provinces. But there will be more wind, more solar, carbon capture and utilization, absolutely, and potentially nuclear, more transmission, and more solutions on the customer end. All of those have to be on the table to be able to meet those stretch goals. But they are stretch goals. There's no doubt about it. These are optimistic targets that we've set.
You talked a little bit about major hydro projects, for example, taking 25 years.
Yep.
2035 is 13 years away.
Yes.
What sort of, is 2035 possible without a dramatic change in how we regulate these projects?
Well, and that's precisely the point, is we do need a dramatic change in terms of how we regulate to be able to meet those targets. You're quite right. 2035 is less than that 25-year target, and so we need to shorten that. And we need to, as I said, we need to begin building now. But the challenge absolutely is that the timelines are tight, but it's not impossible technically. I mean, we can get there. We just need to be able to get through these processes far more quickly than we currently are.
On the regulations, can you unpack a bit about what the problem is? You talk, too many layers, too many different reviews going on at the same time. What does it look like for somebody trying to build a clean energy project right now? What are the hurdles or the obstacles that they're facing that are just kind of making it too difficult?
Right. Well, when looking at building any kind of major infrastructure, but particularly in the electricity space, electricity in theory is primarily a provincial responsibility. But there are 90 federal statutes and laws that actually come into play. And everything from environmental assessment reviews to the Fisheries Act to migratory birds. There are dozens of different areas where we are looking at federal regulations and federal statutes that come into play. And so, first and foremost, we would like to see moving all of that into a single central process. To begin with respect to the federal level. And then we'd like to see far better coordination because we don't have alignment right now between federal governments and provincial and territorial governments. We need to see better alignment, but we also need to see a move to kind of a one project, one approval approach, both at the federal level and amongst levels of government.
And on 2035, the net zero goal, they're obviously still, they haven't put out the draft clean electricity regulation
Correct.
Yet, but we're expecting it soon. What do you guys think? My understanding is one of the key issues is natural gas and how much, for existing natural gas plants, how much beyond 2035 the existing ones will be allowed to continue, whether it's backup power, whether it's to help with some regions like maybe Saskatchewan that have a harder time switching. What is your view on that? How much of a role should natural gas play beyond 2035, for starters, with the regulation?
Yeah, my view with respect to natural gas is it's going to continue to play a role in some jurisdictions that don't have other options well into the future. But we will be looking at a world of carbon capture over the longer term. What we're looking for in the clean electricity regulations is flexibility more than anything else. We need to understand how flexible those regulations are going to be to allow for things such as the need for peaking power during emergencies and how that's going to be handled. And we need to understand what the net and net zero is going to look like. That really, I think, goes to the crux of this, because we're not talking about a zero future. We're talking about a net zero future, and hopefully the clean electricity regulations will give us a sense of how we're going to approach that net and what level of flexibility we're going to see in that space.
There's some environmental advocates that want the OBPS and how it applies to the electricity sector to be changed so that it's basically the flat fuel charge on all electricity emissions. What is your position on that? I know that I believe in the regulations, or at the same time the feds have said they might look at that, but what is your stance on that?
Again, much like our approach to the clean electricity regulations, what we're looking for more than anything else is flexibility and certainty. And certainty is important. Certainty is absolutely critical when we're talking about making very long-term investments. Some of the plants that we talk about are things that are going to be with us for generations, and so more than anything else, what we need is certainty in terms of what the regime is going to be over the medium to long term, and that those regimes are flexible enough to be able to be adaptable as emergencies occur. We live in a world of increasingly extreme weather events. They're becoming more frequent, they're becoming more serious, and so that plays into as well the need to ensure that we've got flexibility to be able to act when that's required.
You talked a little bit about the demand rising and the need for new plants and new facilities. Is the investment capital out there interested in investing in these projects? Is that going to be a challenge, finding people willing to back what I imagine would be billions of dollars in projects across the country?
Well, yeah, when you project out to 2050, it's probably in the beyond $1 trillion. What we're hearing now is that there aren't serious concerns over the long term with respect to access to capital. There are some short to medium term concerns, certainly. To what degree is, for example, the Inflation Reduction Act in the United States going to be drawing some capital into that area? But when looking to a future that will require 2 to 3 times more electricity, there is simply growth on the horizon, and so that's providing us with a long-term prospect that is certainly very positive on the capital side. Where it causes us concern is not with respect to capital. It's the access to the people, the supply chains, the equipment that's going to be required to do that build-out. I think that's going to be a more significant challenge. It's a short-term challenge, but it's going to be a medium and a long-term challenge as well.
Are there projects out there on the books that could fill this gap? Design level?
Oh yeah, I mean, I think when you're projecting out to 2050, certainly some of those are more speculative. But when looking out to 2035, yes, I think there are projects that will be able to meet our requirements. But as I said, it's going to be one that will require an all of the above approach. In some jurisdictions are going to have to be looking at, for example, small modular reactors. As well. We are absolutely, if we're moving in a world of carbon capture and utilization, then those will absolutely need to be deployed to get to 2035. Storage and new storage technologies. It won't just be batteries. We're going to have to move into new and more creative approaches to storage to be able to hit even to 2035. But a lot of those technologies, in fact, all of those technologies exist today. We just need to be able to deploy them.
And you talked a little bit about the balance here, but how much of the regulatory burden is at the federal level? How much of it is at the provincial level?
Well, it depends upon which province you're in. It goes to varying degrees, and so we're not making a judgment call in terms of is it more on one side or the other. The issue we would like to see is if we can consolidate it so that it is a single review process, regardless of whether it's a preponderance or federal or provincial. It should be just a simpler process for people that are trying to build that clean, and more reliable, more affordable future for customers.
Is there a country you would tell Canada to look at and say that's the regulatory system that works best?
That's an awesome question, and it's something that we look at all the time. We just did a regulatory workshop last week where we released the papers that I mentioned. And so we're constantly looking for ideas. There isn't a single country where we're able to say they got all of that right, but we're constantly taking pieces from countries that have done parts of this extremely well. But yeah, there isn't a single country where we can say they got it right. That's the magic bullet. That's what we'll be able to deploy. But there are things that we're learning from watching how things have evolved in Australia, in Europe, in the UK, in Scandinavia, that we're suggesting that be adapted into our systems.
You talked about how the clock is ticking, basically.
Yep.
2035, 4,000, whatever days away. As journalists in Ottawa, we're pretty familiar with the pace of government.
Yes.
They're looking at this regulation. The clean electricity has been in development for 2 years now, at least since the election. In the budget, they signal that they look at the impact assessment, maybe putting more agency, putting more resources to it. But in terms of this vision of having a consolidated, simpler, better regulatory process, how much quicker than normal, I guess, does the government have to move to get this in place so that these projects can be built in a more expeditious manner, I guess?
Yeah, I wish the answer was as simple as we need to be twice as fast. It really does depend upon the project. Larger projects tend to take longer than smaller projects. So there isn't a simple answer of we need to be twice as good as we are now. The more complex answer is we need to do better on all of these. The simple projects still need to move more quickly. The more complex projects need to move more quickly because all of them are going to be required. We good? Okay, thank you very much. Good stuff. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
And do you gentlemen are from which outlets?
National Post, Toronto Star.
And you sit together?
No, we're best friends.
This is awesome. I wish I got a picture of that.
Hey, Ryan asked good questions. I was trying to answer.
No, that's great. Thank you very much. Appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you.